They got Willa. They got my daughter. I need to find her.
From acclaimed director Paul Thomas Anderson.
You can save that girl.
Today, experience what is being called the best movie of the year.
This is the end of the line.
Not for you.
Leonardo DiCaprio, Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Tiana Taylor, Chase Infinity.
Let's go!
One battle after another. Now playing only in theaters. Experience it in IMAX. Rated R. Under 17 animated without parent.
You can't hide.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
You're listening to the Super Rugby Cymru podcast.
Hello and welcome to the SRC podcast. Joining me, Big M, as always, Double R, Rob Rees. We are excited to bring you the end of the season review shows. 2 episodes, bottom 5, top 5, and we start at the bottom. But before all that, Rob, thanks for joining me. How are we?
Yeah, nice to meet you, Mr. Stranger. It's been a while. Four weeks today since we sat down and did the podcast for the final, which obviously I can't remember the result of. But yeah, it's good. It feels good to bridge a bit of a gap. Obviously, a lot of team news and coaching news going on in the background, and it's good to see the SRC stuff rolling on. Fixtures expected out next week after being circulated with the clubs this week. So, yeah, bottom 5.
Happy days. We are missing regular bookie John Harris. He brought a new life into the world last Wednesday. Young Jack Harris was set to make his podcasting debut, but apparently he's a bit of a crier. So unfortunately, there is no John this evening. Hopefully we'll get him back for the top 5 because he's probably going to be devastated and missing out on his chance to speak about his beloved Aberafan. So let's dive.
We said we were covering top 5 next week.
So let's start at the bottom where all things should. We have Swansea in 10th place. 4 wins, 14 losses in the league. 1 win, 3 losses in the cup. Obviously, the really funky cup format. I'm trying to argue with myself whether or not to be positive about them or negative because, first half of the season, I think they lost on like 12 games on the bounce, but they won 4 of their last 8, came really close against Ebu in one of them, and realistically should have at least gone into extra time against Bridgend in the wild card round. So, started the season very, very poorly. By no one's terms did they start in anywhere near the positive zone. But, second half season, they came in strong.
Yeah, well, what was it? Was it 9 games? Because obviously they lost to Aberafan and then beat Aberafan at Christmas. But it's a weird one. Like you said, to judge. If I was grading them, I'd probably be quite not optimistic. I'd give them a D. But I feel that for a side that finishes bottom to receive that, I don't feel that they look back on this season as a failure. I think they were coming into the season a bit misshapen, a bit they needed to set the platform. They sort of struggled to do that, but you could see it was coming in performances. We mentioned it against Llandovery on TV, against Pontypool on TV. They were giving 60, 70 minutes, and then it was teams running away with them. And it was just that 10-0 win over the New Year period against Aberafan was sort of what they needed to kick on the season, right? I mean,
100%.
5, was it? Basically, if you include the cup, 5 wins in the 5 months after Christmas. For a side that sits bottom of the league, that's really good form, relatively context. So yeah, I think they've got a good thing going on there. I think with who they brought in and where they were sitting, I think they'd be more pleased coming out the end of the season than they would have gone in.
Yeah, 100%, especially around that New Year period. Like, I'm just looking over this squad now and the players that they brought in over last summer, like the Chris Davis, Ellis Fackrell, Ben Roberts, Chris Thompson, Luca Giannini, as Matthew Aubrey and Josh Phillips, who were, fairly instrumental for them when they managed to play together. It was a fairly settled squad. So, I mean, if we just take a quick look at last season, where did we go? So, was it 1-6, lost 17? Obviously 1-1, lost one in the cup in the straight knockouts. How it should have been. They finished last but one last season. So it's no real surprise that they are where they are, even though I think all of us did back another team to finish bottom. So I've done some number crunching. So this last season they won 7, lost 18 overall. This season it's won 5, lost 18. So they've gone from a 28% win percentage down to 21.7 this. I mean, I think D is probably been a bit generous. I mean, I'm not going to argue because
I feel it's probably the context of the league as well, right? Let's be honest, last year's league was far easier. You look at the teams that were in there, and you think, well, the teams that they've removed, you could probably get a couple of wins there. Maybe not against some of the sides, but certainly against others. And I think the overall quality, which is probably something we've touched on quite a bit as well, has increased. So you could probably make a case for Dio and really. I guess it depends on how you want to judge them. But I guess if we're judging them against the ethos of the league, they would definitely be a D. If we're judging them on results only, it probably is an E.
Yeah. I mean, it does speak when they've reviewed the season and they've just culled their coaching staff. I mean, that tells you enough about the club. They've just celebrated their 150th this season or two ago, playing the Barbarians at St. Helens. They've had 2, really, really poor seasons by what you'd hope would be their standards, and they've had enough.
It's one of those ones as well. I mean, no disrespect to Hugh, but had he come to the end of his journey with them? Probably, because they've made some really good signings the last couple of years. They've always had those couple of signings. You've gone, okay, Swansea should be pushing up the table here, and they've never done it. They've had the likes of James Hook in charge. They've had Bradley Davis, was it, down there at one stage? They're having quality guys that are going elsewhere and doing a decent job. So, yeah, I think they need that refresh. And yeah, who knows? It'll be interesting to see how the Ospreys thing goes. Now, obviously, they'll be based at the St. Helens. Does that increase their allocation by proxy? That sort of side of thing. That's all going to be one of the next steps for them, I guess.
Very interesting to see where Swansea go going forward. Okay, next up in 9th, Carmarthen Quins. Finished the season with 6 wins and 12 losses in the league. Don't believe they had any wins at all in the cup, so 0 for 4 but there. Only away team to win. It's only the wild card round, so it's not really saying much. They've obviously beat RGC away in the wild card round to get into the quarterfinals. Finishing 9th, that wasn't exactly a guarantee. Probably one of the results of the season for them. I mean, how many teams have gone up to RGC and kept them to 12 points, which is unbelievable. So there's positives in that. I love Carmarthen. I've lived in Carmarthen. I spent quite a good few years there, and I want to do my best to talk positively about them. So I'm not exactly coming from a place of neutrality here. So I'll let you have a little run over these guys for now then.
Yeah, it feels a bit strange because you can see it, especially in the league. Their results are that sort of not a next step up from Swansea, but a significant space above them. But it feels that what they've done hasn't really stepped them anywhere. I don't think they'd be a passing A to C grade. Again, they probably are a D plus, as or that sort of D mark, depending on how you want to look at it. They have had a bit of development going on, and they've had some decent stars, sort of start to sort of appear. They've sort of failed to win some crunch games at key points. I know they won that RGC game, which is a crunch game, but they didn't really get into to enough sides, I feel, and I don't feel that the style they play and how they sort of control the game has always been great. So yeah, they're probably that plus mark above a Swansea side, but again, you'd expect them now to try and boost and sort of supplement this squad a little bit, because I think that's probably where they've fallen short this year. Is they've just not had any depth compared to a lot of the other sides. So yeah, I don't think they've had a bad season. I certainly think that are they better than they were last season? I do think so. I think they are. There was a lot of young heads there last year, and you could see it. They are better this year. So ultimately, I think that's a good sign and deserves to be a little bit of reward for that.
Yeah, so I can't tell you last season they won 6, lost 19, 24% on the win radar. And this year it's won 7 and lost 17. So it's up to 29.16. So like even though it's only one game win more, it's 2 less games lost. And that has just over 5% boosted their win percentage. So you can take that as a positive if you want. No, I'll take a D plus. I'm happy with a D plus, but I'm 100% agreeing with you. Controlling games seems to be the major issue, and you can't be relying on someone like Alan Thomas, who's
No,
he's
is that thing as well, right? Is you're not just relying on someone who's not going to be with the squad. That's the thing. Is when you're in and out, he's a very good player. Or he was a very good player. I don't think he's at anywhere near his best.
no God no.
When you're relying on someone that's going to be dropping in and out, there's no consistency or real help there. They can't adapt, and you can't adapt to them.
Yeah, and obviously what we've seen over the last couple of seasons at 10 is Charlie Titcombe come in and basically completely transform him with his style of play. That is no longer an option. He is now a Leicester Tiger looking to be playing, in the English Premiership, which is unfortunate. I mean, the only positive they've got it is they've had young Ellis Price play, a good few games at 10. His first season really transitioning from 12 to 10. And they do have a very young player. He is still 17 and he will still be under 18s going into next season in Carwyn Leggett Jones. So if anyone has watched Wales under 18s or watched the college finals, recently, will know there is talent in that boy. And a lot of people see he will be at least training with Quins. Whether or not that transitions into actual game time, obviously we're yet to see. But there are things moving forward on that front. I mean, we haven't had much news, if any, regarding the squad. We know Lewis or Louis, I don't know how you pronounce it. Reese is moving down to Pontypool, which I think is is a fairly big loss if you're looking into the depths of the back three. Where they've lost Yori Badam for majority of the season to injury. So hopefully him coming back will do it, but I can see there is a bit of retention needed there. And hopefully a few more young boys stepping out to their 18s or transitioning from other clubs, wherever it may be. So to wrap that up, I'm happy with a D plus. I'll take a D plus. That brings us on to 8th placed RGC. Started the season with I believe in RGC. Won 7, lost 11 in the league, and they won 2 and lost 2 in the cup. So quite close to forcing their way into the cup final. If other results had gone their way, we all expect them to be bottom. So I think that in itself is a big marker. the fact that they didn't just not finish bottom, they didn't go up one place, they went up 2 places. And even though it is tight, we are talking a margin of, what was it, 137, 36 points between them and Quins.
Yeah.
That that win, that extra win, did I manage to see them through? And it was this new bonus point system that really got them into that position. Which again, I'm liking. I like a 6 bonus points. Maybe we get a 7th. Who knows?
Yeah.
Only joking. That'd be way too many. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think RGC, they're probably sitting in a very similar category, probably borderline in D plus C minus sort of area.
Yeah.
Looking on from last season, 7 wins, 17 losses. This year's 9 wins, 14 losses. That's almost 10% increase on the win percentage, which looks amazing. But again, when it's only 2 wins, you start to think a single win counts to a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
In these games now. So what was your take on RGC this year?
Yeah, it obviously did a lot better than I think we were expecting, and I think the experience in the squad has been a massive factor in that. And obviously their home form, they've taken some major scalps from Colwyn Bay. But again, difficult to know because even though they won more games than 2 sides above them and the 2 sides below them, they won 7, everyone else has won either 6, or obviously Swansea with 4. And they had a solid cup run. You just sort of feel that they should have been a lot further up the table with that extra win. They play the sort of game that you're going to score you a lot of points, so they should be getting a big margin as well. But they're just not kicking on in that department. And as you say, it's do you give them that C minus? And I don't really know if you can, or maybe I'm being harsh. And sort of it's very tight in the gradings in this bottom sort of tier, but whilst they've made some progress, do I feel that they've shot enough up the pass? Probably not. They probably still have too many work-ons to be that sort of side, and one of them is converting 1 more bonus points, and 2, I think, it's conceding less points. Ironically, 1 is more points, 1 is less points. I think if they sort that out, they close the gap and go above Bridgend and Aberafon, and then that's when we can start looking at them being a C plus, C or above sort of graded side.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is a positive or a negative. Obviously, we see with some teams that it can be a positive in the fact that they don't have many of those academy players or even parachute players. I think the only one that was actually recognised, I believe, this season is Dylan Alford, who is connected with the Scarlets, but he's I believe he's based up north anyway. Obviously, we've seen Tom Cottle sign for Cardiff, but he's still been RGC throughout the entirety of the season. So they are building the squad themselves. It's always a difficult one to really assess because whilst you could argue, yes, they've probably got over 500,000 people in this sort of catchment area, the distances to get access to all those people and to try and merge them into one successful team is a hell of a job. So I think the fact that they're doing that better than a couple other clubs, and they are vast majority homegrown, I do think we do need to give them a little bit extra for that reason.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking, you're beating out Swansea and Carmarthen, when how many teams are in and around Swansea? How many teams are in and around Carmarthen? Okay, maybe their top end players go to Ospreys and Scarlets respectively. It still doesn't stop those medium players really coming through. So are we settling on a D plus as well, or do we have a different idea for these guys?
I'm thinking D plus at the moment.
Yeah, can't argue D plus. It's a solid grade, not quite pass. We don't really want anyone in the bottom half, not bottom half, bottom 6 to really be passing unless it's an absolute massive increase. So next up, Bridgend, 6th place, 7 wins in the league, 13 losses. 13?
6 wins.
I'm including the knockouts.
See,
There we
dirty,
go.
dirty tactics. Yeah,
That is dirty. That's why there's a few differences. So
discrepancies.
that's the word. My head went blank then. I was like, shit. He said, I know I need to say something, but I can't think of it. So yeah, so I'll stick with my original because it does help.
Yeah.
So 7 wins overall in the league, including playoffs. 13 losses. 2-2 in the cup. 9-15 overall. Last season was 10-16. So 1 win less, 1 loss less. So basically an identical season. Obviously, new coaching system down there this season with Scott being there. We've seen Bridgend, play some terrific stuff, and anytime they've been on TV, they haven't lacked for value. So I don't know how I'm feeling on Bridgend. Like I could go either way by you.
Yeah, as you say, it's very, very similar to last year. And I guess if we're trying to grade on what they're doing with the pathway, I think they're doing a reasonably good job. Obviously, I had a fair few Ospreys come to them throughout the season. Yeah, they signed really well, but I think that goes against them because I feel the players they've got in, Harvey Nash and Ben Burnell, basically they got in Pontypridd. That they signed 4 or 5 people involved with Pontypridd. But I feel like with all that talent, they should have been pushing not just top half of the table, but they need to be closing that gap. And they haven't stepped forwards. They've done what they've done the last couple of seasons and had a really good run, and then it just disappears. And this season, they've been up and down a bit more. They've had a good run, but it hasn't been at the start, but it hasn't been at the end. And you sort of feel that I don't really know if this is sort of a phase one and they wanted to see what was out there. Scott Baldwin was obviously very reliant and saying we still think we can win the Premiership. That's it, win the Premiership, win the SRC. So it's a difficult one because you sort of feel, well, is it a mentality thing? Is it? I think we also agree that it is sort of a squad issue, more so up front. So yeah, I'm failing that you go above a D, and to be honest, possibly just as flat D rather than a D minus because they haven't really gone anywhere. They've treaded water, even with a new coaching staff that includes 3x international players, including a full array of talented players from last season, and that's probably why I'm sticking with D rather than even a D plus. I feel at Bridgend probably been one of the more frustrating sides at times this season.
Yeah, can't argue with much there. I think we all said the same thing from the start of the season, and then going forward, that pack. It's obviously size helps. It's not the be all end all, but size does help, and that seems to be something they're lacking. That little bit more power that I don't know, maybe an extra 2 kilogram a person can bring. Yeah. Obviously, set out of season they were a bit like the Celtic Warriors 2.0, bringing all those Ponty boys over, but you're then looking at the times of player assimilation and then obviously coaching assimilation as well. It's always hard to gauge, but for me it has to go. You got to look at the last few games to really see it where have they finished up. So coaching setups will they'll have their bedding in time, they'll have it, but once you come to the end of that first season, you usually have an idea of how they want to play and how they do it. And we saw in 2 televised matches, one them beating Llandudno, 34-33. I'm still quite struggling to see how that result happened because I've rewatched it since then, and I'm like, there was nothing dominant. Like
no,
there was nothing dominant in there. It just sort of happened, and then we look at the quarterfinal. Was it a quarterfinal? No, the wild card against Swansea, and you're thinking Swansea fluffed that. Swansea had them on the ropes. They could have taken them into extra time, and I would have backed Swansea all the way from there.
Yeah,
So
that's also the inconsistency I'm on about, right? Is 1 week they started really well, dominated the Landovery breakdown for 30 minutes, won that game. Yeah, they won it late. There wasn't a pull away victory or anything like that, but they beat Landovery, who at that point were probably one of the form sides, and obviously still working the end of the season, really. Obviously, the double winners the year before. The week later, they go searing into a lovely lead, completely start to lose their minds, throw it away. The game management goes out the window. And I don't know whether that's a coaching thing, just still trying to settle the squad as well. We saw it a few times throughout the season where the choice around fly half, and yeah, that was partially injury sort of done where Luke Price was out or Ben Burnell was out, and then obviously Phil had to come back, everything like that. And it's yeah, you just get that sort of imbalance, and that's what I want to see more of in Bridgend, just a bit more consistency and that drive up the table, close the gap. Yeah, you're not going to just jump into that top 5 or playoffs. You just aren't. You know, it's probably a 3-year project if we're being realistic. But in that 3 years, I'd expect them realistically now to be somewhere around the 50-point mark next season.
yeah, that's really fair. They've got the tools. They've got the
100%.
tools there to really push on and have more than just a productive season. Title contenders. You're probably not. The bookies are probably only looking at it that way. Most people are probably not. But when it comes down to a playoff system and you manage to make the way into it, whether it's another 10-team playoff system or something different, one game at a time, anyone can do it. Still think that top 4 is top 5 is probably incredibly hard to break into. You're gonna have to; those extra wins are gonna have to come against those teams to have a chance of doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, but
I think that's for 2 seasons' time. I think next season you get an extra 10 points under your belt and maybe pick up 2 more wins against that out of the 10 teams. Obviously, the top 5, you pick up another 2 victories, more than what they had this year. You pick up another 2 victories, you start to see that progression in terms of they know they can beat that top 5. They're starting to get into it. And then obviously in third year, you build again on your squad depth. You've got a little bit more experience. You'd hope you'd have a settled academy allocation, unless obviously players are coming and going with quality game time. And that's when you target the top 4, so should we say.
yeah,
But yeah, I certainly want them pushing past that 50-point barrier next season, 100%. Oh dear, we've lost Matt. He looks really sad on screen. Come back, Matt.
oh no,
back.
oh no, I'm
Bridgend,
back.
I can hear you. I can hear him. He's given up on
Sorry,
Bridgend season. He's given up. He doesn't
sorry.
even want to talk about Aberravon. John, is that you? Giving up before Aberravon come up. Talking about bookies odds, and then he leaves before Aberravon turns up. John,
It's
welcome
not
back, sir.
that bad. It's not that bad. It was a slight disruption in. I don't
I
know. I
had
don't know what
dead
to
air
call
to
it.
fill. I had dead air to fill. I felt like a radio studio. I was at my degree all over again.
Mate, it's recording this end. It probably did nothing. Only joking. Okay, yeah. No, I'm agreeing. Build on season. It's probably a 3 to 5 year, plan that Scott's got in place. And like you said at the start of this little run, they've got a great pathway system coming through with their district side, with their college. We could see Bridgend become a force over the next 10 to 15 years. And, they could become the Leinster of the SRC. Who knows? Who knows?
Well, they bought the European competitions up until this year before anyone starts shouting at you. Only joking.
They did bottle European this year.
Yeah, they haven't bought it this year, but
Oh, come on. Sam Prendergast handed that game to Northampton. There it is. There it is. Okay. Lester, we do have one more team to discuss. And if you didn't already know it, it was Aberravon. They finished in 6th. They cracked the quarterfinals on their first attempt. But surprisingly, I've done up the numbers again. They won 10 and lost 16 last year. They lost 16 this year and only won 7. So gone from 38 something down to 30.4. So quite a big drop in that win percentage.
Yeah, go on. I think I know where you're going with this.
They're more or less in the same position. They didn't quite crack top half last year. They
No.
haven't quite cracked top half this year. But it goes into that same argument, the quality of teams, etc., etc. I mean, if we look at pure league table, 9 and 15, 6 and 12, they're not worlds apart, especially when you consider, there was a couple of wins from a team below them as well that have just magically disappeared. But overall, going back to the start of the season, I don't think I'll double check about you, but I don't think any of us, other than probably John, would have put Abravan, in the top half with Diane.
No, I think it's a reasonable assumption as well, because they turned over, was it 15, 16 players last year? I think 10, 11 left. They had 4 or 5 retired. It was really high numbers. They've recruited locally from Port Talbot, sort of local area, Baglan, supplying a few boys. So it's again going back to how we grade them, the development aspect. They've done really well. I mean, they've had the likes of Sal Nelson, Scott Del Nevo playing really well and sort of getting honours at international level this season. Not had a great allocation or working relationship with that, but given they haven't really regressed, with their situation, they probably stayed about the same, I would say. They're probably very similar position to Bridgend. You could probably argue D plus because of the context of their squad and who they signed, but around again that D mark because they're 17 points off the next position up. They've stagnated slightly, I guess. I mean, it's a new era. There's all context behind this, right? But they stagnated from last year. They haven't jumped up anyway. They haven't gone back, but you like the team to strengthen now. And again, this is probably one of 3 or 4 year plans. You'd imagine if you spoke to Jason Hyatt and he broke it down. So if we're being honest, that's where you need to be. There's no point in being ridiculous and saying we're going to win the league this next year, or is it, it's just not going to sort of happen. So yeah, I think D is probably a favourable grade for Abravan this year. And again, similar to Bridgend, I'd like to see a couple more wins against that top 5. And get push into the push towards our mid-50s. I think Abravan got the setup to do it. Obviously, they haven't really lost that many players either this year, so that's not too bad for them.
Yeah, well, you just touched on it there. They've lost 5 boys. Was it
Cam Lewis, Rowan Jenkins, Andrew Waite with
Andrew Waite? I got Waite there first. I was like, hey, I know it's Andrew.
Yeah.
But obviously Ashton Everett, back row, it's there, and it's like I couldn't get that name right. My bad. So it's Andrew Waite and Rowan Jenkins have retired. Ed Dunford has seemingly gone back over the border to his homeland. And then Cam Lewis has gone to Llandovery.
Llandovery, yeah.
And then Morgan, Clem, however. Yeah. But
looks like he's dropped down the divisions a bit, I'll be honest. He played a bit with Merthyr, but I'm trying to think. I think it was Ammanford?
Yeah.
Or something like that, I think is his original club.
Yeah, he was with Ammanford. He played a fair bit with Ammanford, I believe, last season. I want to say he was in the Scarlet setup, as in age grade, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I really should be, but that's besides the point. But Ed Dunford, obviously, Rowan Jenkins' name will stick out to you. If you ever say his name around Abravan, his name will stick out to you. But Ed Dunford, I think, is the only one that got over double figures.
That's the position that's going to hurt them as well, right? I mean, like Rowan has got a lot of experience, but this year he spent a lot of time injured or unavailable away. He hasn't actually played that many games. Ed Dunford is filling the gap that they've been badly missing with a good fly half. You can tell he's young, he's raw, he's not the finished product, but it's difficult to transition. You sort of build your style around your sort of your half-back combo, and now you've got a good fly half moving on. I mean, don't worry, if they've already done some business. I'm told that they've already signed their 10. John seems to be along the same sort of lines. No names at the moment. So it could all depend on who that is, right? I mean, if it's Dan Bigger coming back to Wales, all of a sudden Aberafon become league favourites, right? But if it is another boy from Baglan or Port Talbot, Tartar, something like that, you are all of a sudden thinking, oh, are they going to take 6 months to start bedding in again? And then they have another season of treading water and finish up roughly where they have this year. So, yeah, overall, I mean, trust the process. I think Jason Hyatt's one that he's been in now a good few years. So he knows what they need to do. They are a top 4 side in the past. So, obviously, ex-finalists when it was the Premiership. So, yeah, again, a D, it probably suits them at the moment. Quite a bit of work to do and just to solidify their game plan, and then all of a sudden they're passing the grade.
Yeah, well, just to touch on that 10 argument, obviously Ed Dunford's only been here for a season. They also signed 2 other 10s this past summer. Tate Shaw, who I don't believe we saw at all. I don't know if he's a kid that's just come into it. I don't know if you can shed some light there. And there's also Charlie Thomas, who's managed a couple games. And then they've had an allocated player, Owen Erasmus, who I believe is his first year senior rugby. So,
yeah,
I mean,
or as we're going to call him, Razzie.
Well, you got to with a name like that. So, coming into this season, if Ed Dunford hadn't been the success that he is, they were starting with a completely new set of 10s. And to lose someone of Dunford's quality is, like you said, that is the one that's going to hit them. But again, like you said, this is going to be probably a longer process than Bridgend. I mean, what was I think there was something like 85% or more of the squad were under 23 at the start of the season.
I think they were the second. I think when I worked it out, they were the second or third year. Sorry, they were the youngest squad, but I think there was only 2 other squads were anywhere near it. It wasn't like everyone was just a couple of months. I think if you're looking under 23, I think there was only 3 squads, something like that. And I think that Aberafon were actually at the bottom of that pile.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing, and especially when you do add in the fact that they are looking local and only local. Yeah. I mean, obviously there are a few boys in it that aren't local, but in terms of the ones that they're pulling in and where they're looking to produce from, it's great for them. It's great for their area.
Yeah, that's just what it's all about, right? Is that development factor? I'd like to see them and the Ospreys open up a bit more. It seems weird when you see the Wales under 20 squad and everyone's listed Dragons, Cardiff, Ospreys, Scarlets, RGC, or whatever, and then you've got Aberafon at full back with Del Nevo and Aberafon at hooker with Sal Nelson, and you're like, hang on a minute, why are they the only club? But for me, that's the one thing that Aberafon are lacking, and I'll be honest, I've got no intel on whether it's a historical thing, whether it's on the regional side, club side. It's likely that there's probably a bit of both. But let's be honest, one, the league is set up for player development, but also I think Aberafon do have positions where they could be needing cover. We've seen it this year where they've been really young, and maybe you don't want to ship in too many academy players, not because they're not young enough or they're too old, because you don't want to displace your home-based talent whilst it's bedding in. But that's their biggest work on for me is getting that relationship going.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, just looking at the allocation for this season, they only had 5 boys, and there are quite a few games between them. Obviously, Erasmus has been mentioned; he didn't actually play much. But then you got Corey Lewis-Jenkins, Connor Moy, Scott Whitlock, and Dylan James. All of whom have featured quite a fair bit. So you can't argue that. I mean, it's always tricky when you're looking at the Ospreys or the Dragons region team, because you're splitting this allocation over 3 teams rather than obviously the 1 or the 2 as with Cardiff and Scarlet. So realistically, 7 is probably the maximum they're going to hope for. and then keeping those specific 7 fit for the whole season. Whether or not then they go on their own little S&C blocks, etc., etc. So there's all these things sort of tie in together that need to be managed. But yeah, fair play to Abravan. They from what I can tell, they're doing the right thing in staying as local as they can and going as young as they can. I mean, the last thing we would have wanted for them to start literally have like, do they have a youth team, or do they come through like Green Stars and literally just take whatever the last 2 years worth of graduates were and just go, you know what, you're our first team now. Go on, boys, show us what you can do.
You've got to do it in the right way, right? That's always the ultimate thing, and that's where this is such a difficult league, as you say, because you want to promote local, you want to promote youth, but equally you got to have that fringe for the drop down players from the regions who are not getting game time for whatever reason, but also for like your seasoned community faces, the boys that have been with your club, your Rowan Jenkinses, your Learyses, your Cam Regans, people like that who have been at the club for 10 years. Everyone knows them. They know a lot of the supporters, the people around the club. So you have that community face as well, and that's ultimately the difficult balance. Obviously, Aberafan had a bit more of a difficult time of it given their turnover, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what we're seeing in some clubs, that their first team is not the community team. It's the second team is a community team, and I think that is a battle that some of these clubs are now going to be looking at with the remit of the league and how they do things. I mean, it's something that I know Llandovery do it, because obviously there's no way Llandovery are going to be fielding 23s every single week. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 local boys in that 23.
Yeah.
And that's no disrespect to them. If you know Llandovery at all, it's it's not exactly the most populous of areas, and then you're looking around. Obviously, there's external factors, but obviously you've got the opposite. Then when you go to somewhere like Aberafan, where you've got probably about 5 clubs within a stone throw of each other, and you're doing the exact same thing in the opposite manner. So good on them. Are we sticking? I think we're sticking with a D. We sticking with a D.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably where we can give it the bottom half of the table, to be honest, is that D plus sort of area. And I'll be honest, I think Aberafan are probably D, with context, of course. But yeah, I think D with the mind that they need to be pushing mid 50s or at least 50 points next season.
So we've come to the conclusion that everyone is either D or D plus in this bottom half, which, let's be fair, is probably generous to 1 or 2. But Gendo Aberafan really need to start, or both even, start climbing and pushing forward into that top half, trying to crack at it, even if they make, that midsection a lot more tighter. We're talking what do you say was a 17-point gap. Even if you take that gap, it stays the same to top 4, but then all those 3 teams behind, they all finish around the 48, 47 point mark. You're creating that jeopardy within that position, and that would be, successful for a couple of teams, not successful with us. RGC is RGC. It's a battle. It's a battle every season just to keep going. As as many would probably think. Quins and Swansea. Let's hope for better things. But until then, we will see you all next week. Rob, thank you for joining me. If you've listened, please like, share, subscribe, do your thing. If you're on Spotify or wherever ones they are, 5-star review sounds nice. We're not interested in 4, 3, 2, or 1. Just give it 5, and if you want to call us shit, we're happy with that. Yeah. And we will be back, hopefully a bit more energetic, hopefully a little bit more knowledgeable for the top 5 review next week. And I can tell you right now, they're not all going to be season above, because there's one team that I'm very, very, very disappointed with. Disappointed with.
Ooh, I feel like you're throwing shade here. I feel this could get tasty.
Oh, it's always going to get tasty when I'm involved. Again, thank you all. Thank you, Rob. We will do it all again next week for the final time this season. Maybe. Probably. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Maybe. we'll stick with that. Thank you all again. Bye.
That was the Super Rugby Cymru podcast. Please rate, review and share us on socials if you can, and join us again next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.